So we'd like to give a very warm welcome to everyone for coming and gathering today, a very special moment, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the premiere of the Journey of the Universe film. That happened actually at Yale. I'm not sure what it happened at Yale at a conference where 3 showings took place. And then around that conference, there were 2 days of discussions, including leading scientists, our Dean Peter Crane, and nature writers like Terry Tempest Williams and Kathleen Dean Moore. It was magical, electric, I would say. A month later, on April 30th, we had the premiere of The West Coast in San Francisco. That was also very, very special. And by wonderful coincidence, today is the 66th anniversary of Teilhard's death in New York City on April 10th, 1955. We're going to begin with a thank you to Jennifer Morgan, who will introduce some of the specifics about this webinar. And then we'll have Brian Swimme lead. I'll introduce him. John will also speak. And as you know, we have a special session on how this is coming forward into the world with Jennifer Morgan, Sam King, and Devin O'Day. We have special thanks to Jennifer Morgan, a longtime Teilhardian, someone who knew Thomas Berry and also studied at Genesis Farm. She wrote 3 books for children, marvelous ones, Born with a Bang, From Lava to Life, and Mammals Who Morph. She created the Deeptime network, which is hosting us today. Over to you with deep thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Mary Evelyn. So just a little bit about Zoom right now. First of all, just keep yourselves muted at all times unless you're talking. We have the chat box open. That's where you will put questions. Just put questions in the chat box. To get to the chat box, you just click on chat at the bottom of your screen. And let's see, what else? One other thing is you have an option of gallery view or speaker view. Just drag your cursor up to the top right and you can click on gallery view where it says view, choose gallery view or speaker view. And it's nice to kind of toggle back and forth so you can see everybody, but then if you want to focus in on a speaker, you can do that as well. So I think that's it about Zoom.
All right, we're great experts on that for sure after a year. I want to begin by signaling our ancestors and bringing them into this conversation. Teilhard de Chardin and Thomas Berry were the key inspirations for this work. Teilhard's Human Phenomenon, which was published after his death, gave us a sense of the great unfolding of evolutionary processes of universe and earth, emerging simultaneously with greater complexity and greater consciousness until humans emerged with self-consciousness. Teilhard also gave us this sense of the within of things, of subjectivity. That's the way Thomas Berry puts it, a communion of subjects. Thomas Berry built on Teilhard to say that we need to tell this as a story, one that responds to the great ecological and social challenges of our time. He felt it was not just a beautiful story, but a functional cosmology, that awe and wonder can inspire transformative action for change. This has been a decades-long process, as many of you know, because Thomas, a cultural historian and geologian, wrote in 1978, The New Story. It was published 10 years later in The Dream of the Earth. And then for 10 years, Brian Swimme and Thomas Berry worked steadily on the universe story, the first telling of this in book form. Brian and John and I worked on Journey of the Universe also for a decade and creating a film, book, and conversations. Brian, as we know, is a scientist of the early universe, but he also had to learn the science of the other parts of the story to write the book and do the film. John and I are historians of world religions, thanks to Thomas Berry's teaching. So we are inspired then to bring together science and world cultures and religions, to bring together scientific facts with the values. And our question is, where is the meaning? when evolution is presented as random and purposeless, that is something that our students are dealing with. And Teilhard and Thomas and Brian and this project is an antidote to that. Now we are going to speak just for a few moments about the film, the intensive labor, but also the teamwork to bring it together. And I'm going to turn over the discussion to Brian to lead this and then come back with John. So Brian, would you take over and give us your sense of how Journey emerged, the form of it, where it was filmed, and so on? Thanks, Brian.
You are so welcome. Hi, everybody. Hi, hi, hi. So good to be together. I've been thinking about this moment and how here we are, like spread over the surface of the earth, Australia, Austria, Poland, all these fabulous places. But, you know, it is, it's Zoom technology for sure, but I think it relates to one of our deepest desires, which is to live in a community where we are known and loved, where we have warm relationships that are rich. And so that's how I'm viewing our event. Even though we're spread out, we actually are also together right now in real time. And what are we doing? We're thinking together. The universe in a very complex way has brought this moment forth where we together are becoming aware together. So to jump from our experience in this moment to the universe, you can ask a question. Is the universe such a community? Is the universe a realm of joy and existence, joy and celebration of existence? You know, as a way of into my own participation in this film project, I go back to a crucial moment in my life when I was learning about the nature of the universe as a whole and learning that it was expanding. It was expanding at a rate that led to living planets. Now, it could have been expanded at any other kind of rate, but it was expanding from the beginning at a rate that would lead to life. I really was thunderstruck when I learned this. I still am. Now, I felt it as a kind of cosmic care, that the universe from the beginning was permeated with concern, a concern that life would come forth. You know, a lot more could be said about these words, care or concern. I don't even know if I would have used them at that time back then. All I know is that something penetrated all the way into my heart. The universe became home. In that flash, the universe became a community of everyone. And overwhelmed with excitement, all I could say was that it had to be shared. And my good friend Bruce Bakhti and I decided that we would create a center where this would happen. And we began going all over looking for allies. And it was such an exciting period. And we found a great many kindred souls. And some of you are here now. And it's just been such a long, long journey. And then the great moment was meeting Thomas Berry, someone who possessed the same passion for this new cosmic story, but with an amazing and comprehensive knowledge of human history. He knew how this story was going to affect humanity and the planet itself. And when we first met, I mean, from the very, very beginning, when we first met, I told Thomas that he had to tell this story to the world. And to my surprise, he said that he had tried to do that. He'd worked with a television producer, Susan Garfield, and together they had constructed a script for TV, and they submitted it to PBS. The title, great title, was The Sacred Universe. And their script made it through various initial stages. And then one Friday evening, Susan got a call from PBS executive, and they said they love the script, but and they're down to 2 projects, either Thomas's script, Susan's script, and this other script. And they had some suggestions. They said, can you put these suggestions in and have them ready for Monday morning? So Susan stayed up the entire weekend, put in the suggestions, brought it to them. Alas, they decided for the other project, and which was produced and did become one of the greatest documentaries of all time, Carl Sagan's Cosmos. You know, when Thomas told me, I just felt like he was so close, you know, just right there, so close. And I was all hot and bothered by this. In fact, I was even angry that they had chosen Cosmos, because I had my problems with Carl Sagan, especially his dismissal of the humanities. But Thomas just cut me off. He wouldn't even listen to it. I remember the way he moved his hand. He just shook his head and said that no. He said the movement into a world founded on a new cosmic story is complex in the extreme, but it is a movement with continuity. He said, Sagan is not your enemy, he's our collaborator. Then he looked at me and said in his quiet voice, you will start where he left off. Wait a minute, Thomas, the idea is that you're going to tell the story. You've got the comprehensive vision of the wisdom traditions, and I could help you out with the science. I smiled again and said, you've got the voice. I croak like a frog. And then he laughed and laughed. He really had one of the world's great laughs, but that's the way he was. And from the beginning, Thomas regarded the new cosmic story as something we were now discovering. And it was going to take, who knows how long, but it was an ongoing process. We were in the process of articulating something new. And even though he put tremendous value on the theories and empirical data coming from science, he held that the story itself, the new cosmic story, was coming from a deeper realm of mind than the cognitive or the rational. And he said the best image to keep in mind for what we were about had to do with the Paleolithic humans. They gathered around the campfire and told stories of the origin and creation of the universe. He said, that's how I should think of things, to be in a lineage of shamans who passed the story down to the next generation. They used the campfire, we would use television, but it was the same essential activity. So Thomas Berry provided what can be understood as the overall vision of a new cosmic story. He also provided what can be thought of as the first draft script. But just as crucial for me is his introduction of me to Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm, who would form the core of our film endeavor. I'm going to tell a quick story of our near tragedy. After several years of conversation about these ideas, Mary Evelyn and John identified a congenial producer at BBC. In fact, he was so excited by our vision of things, he brought a film crew to New York and took initial footage, which he brought back to the decision makers at BBC, his colleagues. And they too liked it. They gave him the go-ahead to create this documentary on the new cosmic story. And the three of us were thrilled. I mean, BBC, it doesn't get any better. But then he laid out the format. He said we couldn't just tell the new cosmic story. The other side had to be represented. BBC's idea was that the film should adopt a modern format of talking heads that are arguing. This was nothing like the shamanic sense of telling the cosmic story. You know, now I can look back on it and realize it would have been a tragic failure if we had tried to cram the story into that talking head format. But boy, was it hard to turn down at the time. I mean, we'd worked so hard and finally to have this flare of enthusiasm. So anyway, after 22 years of discussions and various false starts, I myself was beginning to lose hope. And I was expressing this to Caroline Webb, one of our students in the philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness doctoral program, to cheer me up. She said, dream big. If you could have just any director in the world, who would it be? And I knew the answer. It was David Kennard, because his work in producing the fabulous series at BBC, The Ascent of Man. The Ascent of Man with Jacob Bernowski had long been my favorite. So I told her this just as like a wild dream, but then I thought about it for a second. And I said, oh, wait, one more thing. I'm not moving to England. You know, my work is here in California. So, you know, I assumed he was living in London. She came back 2 days later and she said, I got 3 things to tell you. First, I found David Kennard. Second, he lives in Mill Valley, which is like, 40 minutes away from me. And third, he was looking forward to meeting me the next day. I couldn't believe it. So but with David Kennard on board, everything began to fall in place. It was David who came up with the idea of telling the story over a 24-hour period in the same place. All we needed was the place. So we thought about this and that and this and that, but eventually it became obvious. The place had to be the island of Samos. This was the birthplace of Pythagoras. Now, in the academic circles, many know that Pythagoras invented the word philosopher. So he can be considered in that way, the first philosopher in Western civilization. But what is not as well known is that Pythagoras can also be considered the last shaman in Western philosophy. He combined both worlds. He was the bridge figure between the shamanic tradition and this new cognitive philosophical tradition. Pythagoras was our guy. So, I'll turn things over to Mary Evelyn Tucker now, but I need to tell you something about Mary Evelyn that she won't tell you about herself. When I reflect on the essential people for the making of Journey of the Universe, I can identify easily more than 100 names. And in fact, you really have to say that the people that are alive today, they're just a tiny little speck of the millions upon millions of humans that carried out most of the work that is presented in Journey of the Universe, going back through the millennia. But of all of these, the most essential person for the very existence of the Journey of the Universe is, in all its aspects, is without question Mary Evelyn Tucker. And she will now take us into the actual process of how she made it all happen. Mary Evelyn.
Well, thank you, Brian. But the great joy has been working, of course, with Thomas and you and the inspiration of Teilhard all these years, decades and decades. What a joy. What a friendship. Still flourishing. So I'll pick up where Brian left off, the one day on Samos, 24 hours, a magical island. The script writing that we did in Berkeley while we lived there in a little cottage with David Kennard. And one day Brian comes in with cards and he lays out on this glass table the storyboarding. What would this story include? And of course, what would it not include? So the script writing was amazing. The fundraising, of course, was part of it all. And I remember one day in New York in a cold, wintry day with Nancy Clavins, and we're showing a version of this film, a little bit rickety, like the wind blowing through us. And she just kept edit, and she was with us the whole time. And the book is dedicated to her. The filming, we went 3 times to Samos with David and a BBC crew that came out from the UK, marvelous people. And we had 3 years of editing with 2 remarkable people, Patsy Northcott and Catherine Butler. Now, Catherine Butler did what we could never do, and that was take it from 2 hours to 1 hour. And she did an amazing job on our baby, if you will. And that was because PBS could only take 1 hour. Selecting the images, inserting music, getting that emotional impact of music. What a thrill when Chris Ward came on board to do that. Catherine helped us also with distribution. She found an opening at KQED in San Francisco, the PBS station. Then she helped us move it to national PBS, where it was shown for 3 years. Several millions of people watched it during that time. Patsy helped us with the Emmy Award in Northern California, then getting it on Netflix and in Amazon Prime. This was help that was indispensable. But don't you think the universe was helping us too? We couldn't have done this alone by any means. The book was the next stage where transforming that script into book form was a challenge. But when we brought it to our science editor at Yale Press, Jean Black, she said, and she was stroking the page, she said, "This is like Lauren Isley, science and metaphor, facts and imagination." It was thrilling, a thrilling moment. She calls it a legacy project. And Whidbey Island off the coast of Seattle, we had several summers working closely with scientists for a week. And then at the end of the week, we'd have a public event, one of which was telling the whole story in individual parts. Just so exciting. But every word of the script and the book is vetted with scientific accuracy. And what we were trying to do is, in a way, create, not consciously at first, but it became something of a new genre, a fusion, if you will, with scientific fact, metaphor or image, and meaning. Let me give just one example. When Brian is in the taverna and he has a balloon that he's blowing up, and he's talking about the early emergence of the universe, and he blows it up, it pops, he lets it shrivel, and the meaning here is clearly that the timing was just right. So fact, metaphor or image, and meaning is throughout this book and film. Now, the book has been translated into 7 languages, which is so exciting. And I remember one time, John and I are in Istanbul going to a conference, and there in the airport was Journey of the Universe in Turkish. It's in several European languages, and Chinese and Korean as well, and soon Japanese too. You know, the conversations are a part that our distributor in New York just loves, especially for educational use. There's videos and podcasts now, and we have scientists there who are seeing their work as part of a larger narrative. Leading scientist, Joel Premack, who has time on the Hubble telescope, and he's telling the early universe and so on, and dark matter, dark time. Ursula Goodenough speaking about the cell, and the cell having a sense of self. It's extraordinary. Our students love it. Terry Deacon speaking about consciousness emerging in the mind. I really urge you to enjoy them if you haven't had a chance. And Craig Cockle, who is on this call, is talking about plate tectonics and the geological movements, which are so, so marvelous. You know, we had educators. I believe Mara Grathwell is on this too, and she has shown the film in prisons. And I remember one image of the prisoners through the bars clapping their hands at the end. Jennifer's helped move this into Montessori schools and so on, high schools with Sam and others that you'll hear about. But as well on these conversations, we're trying to attend to the great work, eco-cities, eco-economics, agriculture, permaculture, alternative energies. What are the transformations that are needed? We have arts and activists for justice. And I just want to highlight various ethnic voices. We have several Asian voices. We have 2 amazing Native Americans, David Begay and Nancy Maryboy, speaking about how the cosmologies of their Dene tradition is coherent with this story of the universe. We have African Americans, Carl Anthony, who just got the Thomas Berry Award, and Belvie Rooks, Carl said this whole story changed his life. And Belvy did an amazing summer project in Watts in LA, inner city ghetto, from the streets to the stars, telling this story with 8th grade children, the great migrations from the South. By the end of the summer, they had a festival. Their families were there telling the story. The possibilities are immense, and many of you are involved in them. You know, websites were new back in the day, and Catherine helped us set up the new website. Devin has done this as well. We've redone it many, many times. There's a curriculum there that Sam will speak about. And then also in terms of education, some of you, I think, have been involved in these massive open online courses, MOOCs, as they're called, through Yale and Coursera. There's about 37,000 people watching these. And we think that this is one way to get out the book, the film, and also something on Thomas Berry's life. I'll end with, we're also trying to respond to how did the world's religions take Journey into their sensibilities. So we had a conference up at the Chautauqua Institution. You can see those talks responding to the journey of the universe. We had a marvelous conference here at Yale. How did the Christian community respond? Talks are online. There's a book, Living Universe. So my conclusion is, as you can see, this has been a lot of work, a lot of teamwork, but a great, great joy of creative energy to do this with so many people and the universe opening up at each stage to allow something new to emerge. The showings that John and I did all across North America, one of the earliest was at the University of Toronto with Steve Dunn. Heather Eaton, our close colleague, did an amazing conference in Ottawa at St. Paul's University. And I could tell you so much about these showings, but they've been in museums like the Field Museum in Chicago and high schools and religious institutions. Finally, there was one just before the pandemic opened, and that was in October of 2019 at the Yale Beijing Center. And we asked some leading Confucian scholars to respond to Journey of the Universe. We showed the film, they responded. It was electrifying. The room was packed, a lot of young people. And then afterwards, we learned there were 77,000 people watching this. Journey has a deep, deep resonance with Confucian thought, this notion of universe, earth, and human, one continuity of being. And we are co-creators with that continuity. That's the message of Journey of the Universe. Thrilled to have you here today. And now we are over to John Grimm to speak about acupuncture points in Journey of the Universe.
Thanks, Mary Evelyn. It's a delight to be with you all today. And I have been reminiscing that along with Brian and Mary Evelyn, I think each one of us has watched the Journey of the Universe film probably over 600 times. That's my latest count. And, and I think every time I watch it, I go into a dream. I'm quite serious. It's people say, haven't you seen it? Maybe you want to leave the auditorium. And I sit down and I watch it again. It's like a dream. And every time in the film, something new expresses it. Something new comes up. And as I was thinking about these remarks, I thought, well, what are those moments that are calling me most deeply? And as Mary Evelyn mentioned, I wanted to use the term acupuncture moments in the film. And so what do I mean by acupuncture moments in Journey of the Universe? I mean those moments in the film that activate deep ambiguity through questions raised. These are deep openings that call forth our understanding. I'm drawing on the acupuncture metaphor and trying to activate in all of us a sense of the flow, the creative flow that Csikszentmihalyi was so eloquent in his book, and that sense of the accumulation at certain points in a body or in the flow of chi, in which that accumulation has to be dealt with. And in fact, the whole organism, or that which is dealing with the chi, has to be addressed, and an opening has to be made. So in the film, I found that there are some acupuncture moments for me, and that these call for, as Thomas Berry would say, we need a new dictionary. We need a new thesaurus. We need new words as ways to talk about these seminally creative moments, these acupuncture moments that are transmitted in the Journey of the Universe film. So I wanted to consider several of these moments, or 6 of them perhaps. The first one, if all of you can remember, at the very beginning of the film, Brian makes a remark where he says, the early universe may not have been alive, but it was life-generating. At that moment in the film, it's a very rich moment for me because the music moves in a way that activates the trauma and the demands of having made the film. When Chris Ward made the film, the music for the film, he would send along about 10 seconds of the music. And at one moment, he sent along the music for this particular acupuncture moment. And he had it ending, as Brian said, the universe, early universe may not have been alive, but it was life generating. Chris Ward went to a minor key. Pardon my singing, but dun, dun, dun. He hit a minor as if he wanted to preserve the mystery. And immediately, when Mary Evelyn and I listening to that music, Mary Evelyn said, no, it can't be a minor. It has to be a major, dun, dun, dun. And that's what's in the film. Brian, the music, as Brian said, this is a major moment. It's an acupuncture moment for me. Because this sense that to talk of the living universe is such a dramatic challenge, isn't it? What does, we can say we're alive, but what does a living universe mean? So that kind of acupuncture moment continues for me when Brian is on the beach in the scene where he says, how shall we teach our children? And there is, for me, this exquisite moment where the water comes into the sand and the shadow of the water receding from the sand. To me, it's brilliant. It's one of the moments in the film. And Brian then says, walking away, we know more about the universe in the last 100 years than in the prior 100,000 years. And we all know what Brian is after here. The scientific knowledge has opened up our understanding of the universe and the earth in ways that we simply didn't have before. But the acupuncture moment is the challenge here, that we're opened at that moment to the many ways of knowing among indigenous people and our early ancestors. This knowledge that they transmitted in their cultures, it not only preceded science, but we know it informed it, that science is built on these earlier ways of knowing. So our scientific and indigenous knowledge have obviously grown farther and farther apart into modernity. But I sense now with Journey and with the thinking that's going on among this group too, there's a coming together. These are distinct ways of knowing, and yet they're compatible. Someone like Robin Kimmerer and Braiding Sweetgrass is a really good example of this coming back together again. So another acupuncture moment. At the beginning of the wonderful scene where Brian is at table with all of the vegetables, there's a moment when Brian is full face to the camera. And he talks about the theoretical belief regarding the earth as the center of the universe. This was the dominant Western worldview articulated. It was later in the work of Ptolemy where this earth-centered universe is articulated. But Brian then shifts to Aristarchus, who lived early on around Samos also. Aristarchus had this amazing insight into the idea that the earth was in a solar system with the sun at the center. And Brian suggests that this insight was lost until Copernicus discovered it again in the Renaissance with reference to Aristarchus. However, Aristarchus's insight is mentioned in the writings of Ptolemy. So it obviously wasn't lost. And so Ptolemy dismissed Aristarchus. And it's a question then, it wasn't really lost, but it was in Ptolemy. And what happened here? I feel that this acupuncture moment is an interesting example of the wisdom of science, because science has had this capacity to revisit and correct itself, to rethink these ideas that were dismissed before. Just think for a moment of Wegener and the sense of continents, then drift of continents, and the tectonic points, and Einstein and the cosmological constant. So the wisdom of science to forge ahead with more comprehensive understandings. The next acupuncture point that I'm thinking of is in the film, the scenes of scientific discoveries in the modern period, well into the film. And it concludes with the picture of Pasteur and the field of physiology is cited. The camera then shifts to scenes of young men on an industrial production line with ominous music playing. And this music continues through a robotic factory assembly line, and then to salmon factory farming, to mountaintop removal, and then tar sands petroleum extraction. This is such a powerful showing of the ambiguity of science connected with this colonialist, industrial, extractive world that we live in. And this acupuncture moment, though, is so challenging to me. Do we see science in this reductive mode, and we interpret science as really allied with the industrial capacity all the way along? Or is there in this wisdom of science a groping? And this is what calls out to me at this acupuncture moment, is the sense that science with technology for extractive industries and for manipulation of matter as resource has been the problem. But we now know system sciences are emerging, and there are new counterpoints to this manipulative position. And so we really see the wisdom of science in these types of moments. One of my favorite acupuncture moments is the Whirlpool scene. I cannot look at that scene without thinking of we humans. Are we whirlpools that have emerged out of the creativity of the universe? Every time I view the scene, I think of whirlpools, all of us as whirlpools, elementary matter flowing and forming us ever anew. And it raises the question, who are we in this emergent process? And so finally, a last acupuncture moment when Brian is at the Archaeological Museum on Samos, and he's opening that amazing discussion about language and symbolic consciousness. He goes at one point, and this is a point that for me is cinematically charged. It's these brilliant fading images of cuneiform text on the rock. And these fading images occasionally come across his face. We see the rock in the background. It's just a powerful moment, isn't it? And Brian says, rocks were just rocks until, he's gesturing towards the written cuneiform script language, symbolic consciousness, the powerful implication that writing transformed our human relationship with rocks. Yet this is an acupuncture moment for me, because when we revisit rocks and stones, we know that they have had deep meaning for the human for millennia. I mean, well, we humans have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, but rocks have been speaking to us for these hundreds of thousands of years. So this acupuncture moment draws out again, what is it that Brian was really emphasizing here? Symbolic consciousness in this new mode. And so this communicative power of rocks is coming out of the film, and still I find communicating through me in these acupuncture moments, which I wanted to celebrate with Brian and Mary Evelyn and all of us together in this memorial moment. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Terrific. So now you have a little bit of a feeling of the creation of this, of bringing it out into the world, some of the showings. And I noted some of you were asking, the film is available on Amazon Prime. The conversations are also available that way. And on our website, they're available as podcasts too, thanks to Devin's work. We're going to move now, and Jennifer will also be putting some links into the chat at some point, and we're going to send you a follow-up email with these links and more information. So not to worry, and you can always listen later and share this with your friends. But we're going to make the switch now to our wonderful colleagues, Jennifer and Devin O'Day and Sam King, to speak about the next phases of Journey, especially in terms of education and outreach. So Jennifer, would you like to pick up this exciting new stage that you're so involved with? Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary Evelyn and John and Brian. I'm bowing down to you, really. Brian, your whole idea about community and feeling at home with all of these people around the world, it's something that is emerging so strongly now. I think we all feel it. It's just so powerful. So I'm going to say something a bit about the Deeptime Network, and then Devin O'Day, who is the media producer for Journey and the Human Energy Project, will say something about what he's doing, amazing work with creating videos. And Sam King is the educational outreach coordinator for Journey. He'll talk about what he's doing specifically at the high school level and other educational outreach. So Thomas Berry, who was of course the teacher and guide for so many of us, instructed that the historic mission of our time is to reinvent the human at the species level with critical reflection within the community of living systems in a time developmental context by means of story and shared dream experience. And that is exactly what Journey of the Universe does. We are following our teacher, and we are doing exactly that. Journey of the Universe was one of the principal inspirations for founding the Deeptime Network, on which we are offering courses that take this work into so many different areas. I like to think of Journey of the Universe as a human curriculum, as something that we all need to understand. It's not just for certain groups of us, it's for all of us. And so on our network, it is required viewing and reading for all of our programs. Our courses on the Deeptime Network are courses in deepening our understanding of our context, of vast, evolving, and differentiating universe. It's just stunning. For deepening and our understanding of our matrix, our communion of relationships, not just with humans, but with everything, everyone, all of the life forms, and the whole earth as a single organism. It's helping us to deepen our understanding of interiority, that the whole is subjective and everything within the whole is subjective, has interiority. And that leads us toward action. And what is action in this context? It's to participate in evolution. Maria Montessori, who is also another major inspiration for our network, said that the job of the human is to evolve the universe. That's what we're about. We are about evolving the universe. So on the network, we're right on that cusp. We're taking this understanding of this human curriculum that Journey of the Universe has laid out, and others as well, like Maria Montessori and others. and we're applying it. How do you apply it in movement building? How do you apply it in birthing the ecozoic, in education, in therapy, in religious institutions and spiritual practices, in decision-making at all levels, personal to global, in emergent dialogue to bring about the new, in how we're present to nature, and in personal and communal identity. And that's why we're offering professional development for teachers. And we're also offering longer 12-week courses that have been fantastic. And the one we're in right now has 25 mentors who are mentoring people in all of these above areas. So I really feel, Brian, what you laid out about this global community and the sense of being home. This is what I keep hearing people say. I found a place where I feel at home. It's just extraordinary to have a global home. And so come September, we will be starting a 9-month leadership and personal empowerment program that will combine this understanding of an action of the journey of the universe and applying it within these different areas. And people can start their own projects within these different areas and have mentors. I'm so grateful, and on behalf of the entire Deeptime network, and there's so many of us here in this meeting, we want to say thank you. We're so deeply grateful to you, Mary Evelyn, and John, and Brian, and for what you're doing, Devin and Sam as well. So Devin, how about you take it away?
Sweet, thank you, Jennifer. It's amazing to be part of this celebration. 352 people strong at this point, pretty incredible. You know, when I think about Journey and my experience with it, the first thing that comes to mind is that my first encounter with it, it felt like a gift. It felt like something that I was being given that was beautiful, amazing. It sparked something inside of me that I knew was always there, but needed a little bit of kindling, a little bit of a catalyst to really get pushed forward in myself. And then once it was, it just blossomed into this whole mode of being, this whole level of energy in my body that after experiencing that, the only thing that I could do was think, how can I share this with others? How can I share this perspective with other people, not to try to convince them of anything, but other people that might be where I was? How can I put this in front of them in a way that they can connect with it and integrate it in their lives in a way that's meaningful to them? So that's kind of where I came to the table with Brian and Mary Evelyn when I started working with them 3 years ago as the project manager for Journey of the Universe. How can we use the internet as it is now to reach more people than we ever thought was possible 10 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago as these narratives and concepts were first emerging? And so with that, I've done a lot of different things working with Mary Evelyn and Brian to reposition some of the original materials in a way that's as accessible as possible, and then putting them in new formats as well, like podcasts and videos. So I'll do a quick little tour of the Journey of the Universe here. So what you'll see here is the new website, if you're not familiar, or if you're just familiar with the original website. But here we just have a streamlined layout of all the core offerings that are in the Journey of the Universe ecosystem here at the top. The online courses here, and very easily accessible to anyone that first lands on the website. A very simple presentation of what this project is about. Again, navigating through the core offerings as you move through the website, what we're presenting to the world and why. And then here at the bottom, you'll see all the different aspects of the projects that have been built up over time, really accessible and at the bottom of every page. So in the original website, this was all there, but as websites go, these things start to add up and get a little bit complex. And so one of the first things to do with the Journey project was to just simplify and streamline it. And that's what we did. There was a lot of mention earlier about the various Journey conferences, and I really encourage you to check those out. There's a lot of different videos and papers that are organized and presented on this page that are available at the footer of every website or every web page. One of my favorite things to do was to take this 20-part conversation series that Mary Evelyn did with scholars and artists, activists and teachers, and to take the videos and stream them as podcasts. And so that's available on the Journey website. When you hit podcasts, you'll go to this page, but it's also available at any podcast distributor. This is Apple showing it. So if you haven't checked out this conversation series yet, it's a really wonderful thing to take in. And now that it's in podcast format, you can do it while driving, or even better, while taking a nice sunrise hike on a trail and just enjoying a slow morning. These podcasts can be a really nice companion to that. Another thing that we did, that was the first season of the podcast. After that, we moved into a season 2 where we featured Brian's Powers of the Universe series. Not sure how many of you here are familiar with that series, but if it's not 100%, then this is one of the reasons why we presented the powers in the podcast forms. Brian, Mary Evelyn, and John, Journey is not the first thing that they've done. Obviously, it's a whole legacy that it comes out of. And so through the podcast, we're trying to present these various offerings that are complementary, nourishing, and kind of fill out more of the Journey narrative in a bite-sized format on the podcast format. And these are all coming out of, Brian's website. And then here is the Human Energy YouTube page. This is where Brian and I are working with the Human Energy organization to create a new series called The Story of the Noosphere. And that's where we're exploring the emergence of the noosphere, which is certainly in line and part of the continuum of the Journey of the Universe, one of the most present and inspiring, but also elusive phenomenon, the noosphere. And so we're making a series of videos that explores that from as many different angles as possible. But in general, what I'm interested in doing and working with Mary Evelyn and John and Brian and Sam and Jennifer is trying to think about how we can take this functional cosmology that we all are in love with and make it function in the world. And the way to do that is to try to make as many different forms of media as possible and see what works. Get feedback from the world of what's engaging and what's not, where there's questions and where people want to learn more. And so media is a really powerful way to do that. And I'm about as dedicated as it gets to figuring it out with the rest of the team. And it's been a pleasure so far, and just really excited to be part of this 10-year celebration. Thank you. On to you, Sam.
Thanks, Devin. My name is Sam King, and I've been really fortunate to work with Devin and Jennifer as the Educational Outreach Coordinator for Journey. It's a joy to be with you here today. And as I look around the Zoom room, I'm reminded of Thomas Berry's insight that the universe is a single, multi-form, celebratory event. I first encountered Journey while I was a young teacher at Hotchkiss, a boarding school in the Berkshire Mountains of Connecticut. And on a rare Saturday without classes, I traveled through the countryside to a retreat center called Wisdom House for an intriguing workshop led by Mary Evelyn and John. I listened to them speak with an infectious sense of wonder about the great flaring forth, about the emergence of our cellular ancestors in the ocean deep, about the universe telling its story through us, and I was enthralled. I realized that Journey offered a much needed story for our time, a story that could speak to young people yearning for a sense of belonging and a moral vision to confront the challenges of our time. I decided to show the film to my students in philosophy and religion, and I was thrilled when Mary Evelyn and John accepted my invitation to visit campus. I'll never forget the way Journey lit up the eyes of my students and the way it drew out such moving reflections on science, religion, and their search for meaning. I sensed that Journey connected the dots for these students, weaving the great questions of the humanities within the larger tapestry of cosmic evolution in a way they'd never experienced before. And since leaving Hotchkiss for graduate school, I've been lucky to work with Mary Evelyn and John to broaden the educational mission of Journey. I've helped them lead discussions on the film with a variety of audiences, from high schoolers to graduate students to learners from across the globe in our online courses on Coursera. And with the help of Jennifer and the Deeptime Network, I'm also excited to be working with a team of passionate educators to curate resources that empower teachers to bring the story of the universe into their classrooms in a way that inspires personal and ecological transformation. In that spirit, I've also expanded on the university level curriculum developed by Matt Riley, who compiled a series of scientific summaries and discussion questions grounded in the 11-part story of Journey. Last summer, we released a secondary school teacher's guide that takes the scientific insights of Journey and integrates them with a variety of new discussion questions, artistic exercises, and contemplative practices designed to help young people reflect on the story and bring a deep time sensibility into their everyday lives. For instance, students can learn about the early universe by writing a cosmic autobiography. They can learn about stars through practicing a meditation that mirrors the processes of nuclear fusion and gravitational attraction. And they can learn about the emergence of cells through studying leaves and vegetation in their own communities. And through these experiential encounters, students can start seeing themselves as integral members of an evolving universe, and they can align themselves with the generative powers that sustain all life. And I just want to thank Brian, Mary Evelyn, and John for inviting us all into this story and inspiring us with their vision. And I'm excited to help younger generations continue to take up the great work for the benefit of the entire Earth community. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Sam, Devin, and Jennifer. We're thrilled to be working with you, partnering with you, and we look forward to many years ahead where we can support your talents and your creativity. It's such a joy, such a pleasure. There's some questions in the chat, and if you have other questions, please put them there, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. So first, someone asked about the availability of Journey. And as I mentioned, it was earlier on Netflix. It is now on Amazon. And I know that there's a critical comment about that there, and we share your criticism of Amazon deeply. It was put on quite a few years ago. But in any case, it is what it is, as we say, and we're more than happy to give you a Vimeo link so that you can share it with your friends and so on. So afterwards, we can certainly do that. Devin will have to tell us about the YouTube thing, because technically there's copyright issues here, you see, but of course we want to make it available. And I'm not sure about the YouTube availability. So I also just want to say, someone asked about director's cut. And that has been in the back of our mind. I'm going to throw a question Brian's way, and he can certainly comment on that. But you know, our plates have been so full, as you can imagine, that we simply haven't gotten to that. But at some point, we'd love to release some of that film. It's not inexpensive to get it edited and up to speed in the quality that the film already is. So that would take a good deal of time and commitment. But it's in the back of our minds for sure. But I did want to also mention that just recently, the wonderful film called The Great Story about Thomas Berry that Nancy Stetson did over many, many years. She's giving it to the Thomas Berry Foundation. And so we will have the copyright for that going forward. And we're certainly going to figure out ways to make that available on the Thomas Berry website and maybe through the MOOCs. And thank you for a couple who've said you've taken those online courses and enjoyed them. So we really appreciate that. We also have conversations that Thomas Berry did years ago that Bruce Bhakti, who I believe is on this call, helped to produce, and he produced many of Brian's early videos, as you know, and we're so grateful to him and to Pamela as well. And that conversations with Brian, where Thomas is speaking extemporaneously, are really marvelous. And Devin has helped to make it available. And hopefully over the summer, we're going to release that so you can have the audio conversations with Thomas Berry. So Brian, I'm going to just, if you don't mind, put a question your way. I guess two, if you want to say anything about the the director's cut or the marvelous selections that we have of some of your work, our work in Samos, consciousness. That scene is just amazing and so on. So that's one question about a director's cut. And we're thrilled, of course, that right now you're working on the Human Energy Project with these short videos. So we know probably a director's cut will be in the future because your plate is very full. The other question was on a multi-universe, the multiverse, and kind of what you might have to say about that. So 2 questions for Brian.
Well, I don't think it's the multiverse.
Multi-centered universe. I'm sorry, I did get the question.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah,
okay?
there is. You're so right. And I was trying to scroll down while listening to all our colleagues.
You're always
absolutely right.
multitasking. I mean, always.
I know. So sorry. Multi-centered universe. Thank you. Good.
Well, okay, back to the director's cut.
Yeah.
You know, they left my best performances on the floor. Okay?
Who's they? It's a we. We all do.
Oh, you know, it's always the people in charge. You know, I'm just hoping that $100,000 will show up, and then we'll have a director's cut. I would love that. It'd be so great. At any rate, multi-centric. Now, I guess the question was, has any more work been done on that? Right?
Director's cut, not yet. It's sitting in our basement.
No. I'm done with the director's cut.
Oh,
We just don't have the money.
Yeah.
But then the question about multi-centered, right?
yeah.
What's the actual question?
What is your comment about a multi-centered universe?
Oh, okay. That's something I can respond to. The notion, you know, with mathematical cosmologists, of a universe, each point of which is the center, that's widely accepted.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bizarre idea, and the reason it's so bizarre and hard for us to understand is that we have trained ourselves to think that there is a perspective from which you can see reality. There's one perspective, and there it is, right? And it's the idea that there's one way of knowing. So Carl Sagan, I mentioned my argument with him. You know, some scholars say there are 5 different ways of knowing something. You can know it from the point of view of science, from the point of view of history, from the point of view of philosophy, from the point of view of art, from the point of view of religion. Each of these is a valid way of coming to reality. And Sagan wanted to throw those all out because he was convinced that the scientific point of view is the only one that gives you knowledge. So see, that's why I'm just saying we've all been trained to think that way. And so we think there is just one center. No, there are multiple centers. That's what's so exciting. It means that each of these, the deep cultural perspectives that have surfaced over the history of humanity, each of them has something valuable to offer. And it is by bringing them into dialogue with each other that we arrive at wisdom. So I still think it's a great insight that we haven't yet really fully incorporated, but you see it now with the discussions in gender, you know, breaking out of that binary point of view, the discussions of race. All of these can be considered the way in which the multicentric nature of the universe is entering into our way of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Brian. You know, someone else asked about Indigenous teachers. And of course, John's specialty is Indigenous cultures. We've spent a lot of time on the Crow Reservation in Montana, and he spent a great deal of time with the Salish peoples in Washington State, and we're adopted into a family on the Crow tribe. And Brian has ancestors from the Salish peoples in BC too. And so indigenous ways of thinking are very, very important to all of us. And as I mentioned in my brief comments, that two extraordinary Dene people are in the conversations. And Nancy Maryboy and David Begay. And if you watch those conversations, I think you'll really enjoy how they were speaking about their indigenous cosmologies are coherent with Journey of the Universe. These were students of Brian's, and just marvelous, marvelous people. So yes to indigenous traditions, and Jennifer's also working with indigenous voices.
Just to pick up on Mary Evelyn's referencing the director's cutter, what was left on the cutting room floor and what might be in the direct, and this image of the in a indigenous perspective, but I would say in all cultures, there are shamanic healers. There are individuals who are able to enter into the dynamics of the universe in such a way that they can literally bring that to bear on particular moments. In the film, if you recall, there is still a moment where Brian is lit in full sunshine. It's right after the galaxy conversation, and Brian is making a gesture with his arms. And he says, this is the way to think about the galaxies, not as a thing, but as this wave that's passing through and making stars. Every time I see that, it's a shamanic gesture. It's like the universe, as you just sense the arm, the creativity that we live in this universe, that is accompanied by a set of film on the cutting room floor. It is the same bright setting where Brian talks about the multi-centered universe. And someday when that finds its celluloid presentation again, that's a real shamanic moment also, where Brian is talking about the multi-centered universe.
Yeah, maybe we can follow up that with a question back to Brian, and then I want to bring Sam and Devin and Jennifer in too. So there was a question, Brian. Do you feel that we are at a moment of new awareness, that we're crossing over to new awareness of consciousness? And this might relate to your new project on human energy and the noosphere. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I really do. I think we are. We're in that moment of transition. And I've thought about this so much, but I think I've actually found a very efficient way of participating in the transformation. And let me just lay it out here. Just it's very direct. I think it will be developed by people as we move forward, and far better than I could do it. But I'm just saying, at least if you're interested, this is a way of jumping, of taking the leap in being. That's what we're being asked to do. It's a leap in being. And one way to describe it is we're moving from Descartes' view of matter into Thomas Berry's view of the universe as a communion of subjects. So, and here's a suggestion for you to try. Of that, you go out. You go out and look at the stars, and you look up at the stars, and you take in something that previous humans didn't really know the way we know. We know that we're composed of the creativity of the stars. Okay, that's the first level. So your body, every carbon atom of your body was constructed by a star. But now here's the next level. Here's the next level. Your mind has been constructed by that same process. The mind wasn't inserted from outside of the universe. The stars you're looking at gave birth to the mind you are using to look at them. So a way of bringing this together is to realize that we are the stars reflecting on themselves. Okay, now I want to take it one last step, and here it is. This is the way out of dualism. When we're looking at the stars, we're looking at the process that built our bodies and our minds and our awareness. We're looking at that process. So it's accurate to say this last line. When we look out at the stars, we are looking at that which is looking. And this is an experience that we can have now that former humans could not have. We've lost so much, but we have this opportunity to experience something new. And my own intuition is that movement is going to give rise to another human species. Thomas Berry would often say that the human species reinvents itself, just as Jennifer brought up. So this process of reinvention involves everything, even the very structure of our consciousness. Okay, I'm getting carried away. Sorry.
I love it. No, not at
Calm
all.
down, Brian. All right.
It's terrific. It's terrific. We've lived for 40 years inside a very dualistic academic system of secular academia. And there's lots of consequences for that. So what Brian just said is what I think most of us on this webinar are certainly accepting, but trying to move into that space. And I want to just put over to Sam, because I think it's a nice follow-up. The curriculum that he's developed that is on the Journey website under curriculum, just you'll find it that way. He took the first form of the curriculum that had the science that Brian worked out with Matt Riley. Here's the science of the evolution of stars and galaxies, planets, etc. And then here's how we tell it poetically. And then here's all kinds of resources. So there's an amazing curriculum that is already up there. But Sam took it to another level, especially because secondary schools and even middle schools are getting very excited about this, as you know. And I just want to have Sam tell us, what did you do to that marvelous curriculum to enhance it for these kinds of students and beyond?
Yeah, thanks, Mary Evelyn. So I was just expanding on so many insights and wisdom that I had inherited from the Journey project. And I like to think of that curriculum as sort of the particularity and the differentiation of the ways in which this story is being told to younger generations and the way it resonates in unique and multifaceted ways with younger learners. And so in that spirit, I wanted to create a curriculum that was going to activate not just the intellectual and analytical capacities of these young people, but their artistic imagination and their personal, spiritual, and contemplative sensibilities, yearning to make some sort of meaning from this large story of cosmic evolution. So I was lucky to collaborate with a number of amazing educators, some of whom I've seen on this call: Lisa Shebley, Missy Lauren, Easy Fugate. I've recently been able to connect with some amazing and passionate educators in this space who are trying to bridge these different ways of knowing and open up our humanities curriculum and our science curricula to this larger story that humanities doesn't have to start with the ancient cultures of Sumer and Mesopotamia and Egypt, nor with Earth history, but with universe history 13.8 billion years ago. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you. I hope you can all take a look at it. There's a couple questions about sort of divinity, God, etc., in Journey of the Universe. And I'm happy if John wants to jump in here too, but we had this amazing showing in Costa Rica. Do you want to say something about that?
It was a very special moment. Of course, as historians of religion, Mary Evelyn and I have intentionally brought the film to different religious audiences. Not to convince them of a position, but to rather enter into a dialogue. How would they tell the story of the universe as they see it in the film? Or how does it react to a Buddhist sensitivity or a Muslim? How would Islamic consciousness begin to think about this and tell the story? Because the difference is remarkable, and that's what we're really excited to hear. So in Costa Rica, we showed the film, and at one point a teacher stood up in the front rows and very politely asked, I've enjoyed this film so much, but where's God in your film? If you're talking about creation, where's God? And of course, Mary Evelyn and I were all set to answer when suddenly in the back of the room, a teacher stood up and she started out in Spanish initially, and then she switched to English so that we could understand. And she said, looking for God, my goodness, God is in the whole film. Haven't you seen her? And it was one of those moments. It was just the whole group erupted in applause and even the one woman who had asked the question, because this sense of wonder and the magnificence was so evident to all of us in the room.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to the spectrum. And this woman in the back actually said, the minute the music starts, you can feel the mystery. You can feel something much larger than our language, back to John's point, can really give us. So, there's a spectrum. I see some of you referring to Dennis Edwards' work and so on.
Yeah.
There's Christian theologians working towards this. I mean, Richard Rohr and others, Lou Savory and his Teilhardian Ignatian exercises, etc. So all of
the wonderful teacher of Sally McFay, Gordon Kaufman, who is such a wonderful colleague at Harvard, and Gordon put forward the phrase serendipitous creativity. That was his idea of God, serendipitous creativity.
And you see, someone like Gordon, that's very congruent with Journey, emergent properties and processes, right? Self-organizing dynamics. And what we're trying to do here is not have overtly Christian or religious language, but it's also why I've said we've tried to have these conferences and conversations in relationship to people from various world's religions, and to respect this spectrum from those using and valuing religious language and so on. That includes Teilhardians like Ilia Delio and so on, very much within a Christian worldview. But Thomas was so ingenious, because his deep appeal was for people who, yes, may be very much flooded by these traditions, but also yearning for something beyond that very specific language. And that's what was so exciting for us, because it opens us to the space of new language that John was speaking about. And back to Devin and Sam, the language of young people, our students are just aching for a broader language. I see Sam shaking his head. I don't know if you want to add something, Sam, to that.
Just affirming everything you're saying, Mary Evelyn. I think trying to reconcile, the religious traditions in which so many students are reared with the scientific curricula they often encounter, which is often organized in fairly fragmented and reductive ways. And they're yearning for a coherent worldview or cosmovision. And I think we are at this incredibly generative historical moment to think creatively and to try to align ourselves with how the universe and the creativity of the universe is speaking through us to reimagine the way we educate, the way we resonate with these young learners.
Excellent.
Yeah. That's so great. And
I'd like to jump in for a second.
please, Jennifer, sorry.
Yeah, because we actually have quite a few Montessori people in this meeting.
Good.
Good.
And so the great work that Sam is doing at the secondary level, and that many of these trainers, like Tammy, who is on here, she works with, she has thousands of followers on Facebook. So, and what we're doing on the Deeptime network as well is looking at education as a spiral that starts all the way from day one, when you're born, all the way up through life. And so the first phase, the early childhood, is the phase of the senses, where you get to know, how are you getting to know the universe? You're getting to know it through the senses. Then you move into, in the elementary years, into story. This is when the child asks, where did everything come from? So then you move into teaching through story. And then as you move into the middle school years is when the child begins to see themselves in the story. And they didn't see themselves in the story beforehand, but now they see themselves in the story. And then they move toward a sense of cosmic task. So it's just amazing. And all these different pieces are happening. And so we're all trying to connect with each other. It's a grand thing.
That's so super. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I just also wanted to say someone on this call is asking about the Jewish tradition entering in here.
Yeah.
And that's where the Chautauqua institution, if you Google that, Larry Troster, a rabbi, responded to Journey from the Jewish tradition. But we could also say one enters this through wonder, through awe. And then we have Abraham Heschel. We have Martin Buber with the I-thou relationship, and Arthur Green up at the Hebrew Seminary in Boston, a whole range of really marvelous rabbis and thinkers on this issue. I also wanted to say, some of you mentioned, I didn't finish my list, but the eco-feminist theologians like Rosemary Ruther and Sally McFaig and Heather Eaton, who's on this call, have also done marvelous work. And we need to keep that feminist dimension alive in this conversation. So I wonder if we can also just come back to this sense of great transition or great turning that we're in the midst of. And that I simply wanted to underscore, because I know that we're just about running out of time, that this is oriented to a transformation of consciousness for our moment, for sure. And we know we're at one of the most critical points in human history. And that, as Brian says at the end, wonder will guide us. And he also says, as he gets onto the boat in one of the last scenes, what if we imagine ourselves as the mind and heart of heaven and earth? Now, that is from the Confucian tradition, and there's many of the world's religions woven into this, this journey. But it is to say that the energy that we need to get to the great transition, the great turning to the next stages, is a profound spiritual, physical energy. And that's what Journey is trying to help generate. This is generative. Our friend Julianne Warren speaks often about generative energy. And that's the offering of Journey to transformation in our time. John,
and
please.
as we come towards Ramadan, I'm reminded of that powerful moment in the Quran where the divine presence, where Allah, prior to creation, raises the question, who will accept the trust? And that trust doctrine, that understanding of the trust commitment in Islam is a powerful entry for ecological thinking, and especially opening towards journey of the universe.
Yeah, let's just take a moment for final comments from Jennifer, Devin, Sam, and Brian, and just something brief to wind us up. Jennifer, great hosting. Thank you.
Oh,
Final comment.
well, I'm just so impressed as I look, through the list here, how people are coming from so many different worlds. It's not a single world. There's so many worlds here, from educators to religious people to people from different cultures and different ways of knowing. And so it's back to that idea of this is the human curriculum. And I note that John Layden is also on here. He's a priest, a Colombian priest in Manila. And he's the one who gave me that phrase of the human curriculum, which I just think is so descriptive. And I'm just thrilled to be connected with, it's just an amazing life work to be able to
Wonderful.
doing this and connecting with everybody.
Thank you, Jennifer, for everything. Devin, would you like to say any final comment?
Yeah, my final comment would be that the more time that I've spent in this space and with this community, and become more aware of all the existential threats that face humanity, even with all of that, the more at peace I become every single day, because this story gives me a grand perspective that allows me to feel like, even though there's a lot of work to do, everything will be okay, because the universe has been in this position before and it will continue to move forward. And I'm just very grateful for that perspective that, as Mary Evelyn points out, very much does energize my work, knowing that I'm connected to a grand continuum.
Yes, and you do that
Well
so
put.
beautifully through the equinox, the seasonal changes, Devin, and you and Sam are so connected to that. We just love to see it. Thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Devin.
And Sam, how about you, who took a dip in the Long Island Sound this morning to celebrate this day, freezing cold? Sam, any final thoughts, comments?
Sure, yeah, it was a great a ritual commemoration of this special day. Yeah, I recall in a recent class with Mary Evelyn and John, I'm a TA for their class called Asian Religions and Ecology. We were studying the Bhagavad Gita, this great Hindu devotional text. And we spoke about how the god Krishna counsels Arjuna to act without attaching to the fruits of his action. And I'm just reminded to dovetail on Devin's remarks that this convergence leaves me inspired to work toward the life generativity of the universe story, and to work toward the flourishing of the entire Earth, even despite all the obstacles and the challenges we face. Even if we're not always successful, and even if the forces are strong, there is virtue and there is great power in coming together with all of you from across this across the Earth, and trying to work toward a more flourishing Earth community. So thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you, Sam. Brian, the final thoughts?
Yeah, not really,
Okay,
except to say that it's just been really fun being together.
great.
Really, I wish we could all just go out and dance right now.
That's so perfect. I want to give a shout out. I had this almost dream last night that we might end with Paul Winter, but I didn't quite get it all pulled together. But he's got a beautiful new album with this wood thrush song. I really recommend it to you. But I wanted to bring him in along with Paul, with Sam Guanaccia and Paula, who did an oratorio for the universe story. And what I want to end with is we need art, we need music, we need dance, as Brian just said. And so we're very, very grateful to those, some of you writing poetry, as you're saying here, Mary Oliver giving us her magnificent views of this living Earth community. So that's one thing I just wanted to say, the Earth Mass that Paul Winter does, the celebrations for solstice are so extraordinary. So I'm just going to read to end us this Earth community, this home that Brian is speaking about. We've had people here from Ireland, from Berlin, from Madrid, from Belgium, from the Netherlands, from Uruguay, from Australia, from Turkey, from the Philippines, from Canada, from the East Coast in Halifax to the West Coast in British Columbia, to Ottawa, to Kingston, to London and Ontario, and all across the US, from Kentucky to San Francisco and Berkeley, to North Carolina, our friend Herman Green, to Florida, to California, all across the country and around the world. what a magnificent special celebration of this anniversary, and of Teilhard as well. I'm sure Teilhard and Thomas have loved this. So Jennifer, once again, thanks to you.
Thank you.
And we'll
Jennifer.
follow up with a letter and more information. We look forward to keeping in touch with all of you. Deep, deep gratitude. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
All best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
All the best.
All best.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, John and everyone.
Bye.
Peace,
Bye.
AI forever. AI
Thank you,
forever.
everybody.
Mary,
so
much appreciated.
Take care. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, hello, Ireland.
Hey, Kathleen.
Kathleen.
Our earth is your earth. Our earth is my earth.